Hi, my name is Siyue. I grew up in a Christian family and my parents were very strict about us having to do Christian things. We said prayers before meals and even had family devotions sometimes. My family even had a reputation in church for being the family that always won Bible quizzes. I also went to a Christian school, so I had a lot of knowledge about Christian culture and experienced it on a daily basis. I always thought I was a very good Christian. After all, I went to church and Sunday school faithfully. I knew the Bible pretty well, and I didn't do rebellious, unchristian things like swear, cheat, lie, or smoke, and so on. In fact, I thought I was so good that I remember thinking to myself how other Christians could call themselves Christians when they did such terrible things, which to my goody two-shoes Sec 2 brain was things like using Facebook when the teacher brought us to the computer lab or saying mild swear words frequently. I also thought I was a very spiritual person and thoroughly enjoyed times of extended worship where I felt very connected to God and felt overwhelmed by His love. I also believed confidently that as long as I tried my best in my studies and prayed and had faith, God would make my path straight and I would lead a happy, comfortable, healthy, and successful life. After all, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, right? Here's the part of the story that people might expect that I suddenly fell off the wagon and rebelled severely, or that I suddenly suffered from terminal illness until I had some dramatic supernatural experience with God. Well, no, nothing like that happened. In fact, I did well in all my national examinations, got a scholarship to study to become a teacher, which was exactly what I wanted. Along the way, though, a few things happened that started changing my original worldview. First, I started actually reading the Bible itself as a complete book. Previously, I knew various Bible stories like David and Goliath or Jesus turning water into wine, and I would be able to quote all the popular famous verses like Jeremiah 29:11 or Philippians 4:13 and so on. But when my church did a read through the Bible series, I started reading through the whole of Genesis, and I remember feeling very disturbed by the God I was reading about. Why was he so weird and mean? Another thing that really shook me was that I read Romans 3, which talks about how all humans are totally sinful and have rejected God, and that there is not a single righteous person on earth because no one seeks Him. I had thought that I was much better than everyone else because I didn't do all those unchristian behavior. But as I read the Bible, I realized that arrogance and pride was very much an attitude that refused to acknowledge God and hence was sin as well. It was very easy for me to do the Christian behavior on the outside, but harbor and hide many sinful thoughts and feelings on the inside. While I would probably easily rattle off that Jesus forgave my sins, growing up, I never really saw myself as sinful or in any need of God's forgiveness. Something else that happened was that I saw people, strong Christians, suffering from illnesses even at young ages and eventually passing on. I wondered why the God whom I thought was supposed to bring health and happiness was seemingly absent in these cases. Did I really know Jesus, or was I just making up things about Him that I wanted to believe or heard from second-hand sources? To put it all together, there were three things that I really started to wonder about. Did I really know God as well as I thought I did? Just how sinful did I think I really was? Was God really going to give me happiness and health as long as I trusted in Him? In year 4 of university, I joined a Christian group on campus. I started to read the Bible more systematically and in context, which helped me to answer those questions and come out more certain of what the Christian faith is. First, I learned that I needed to let the Bible itself tell me who God is. Instead of having some preconceived ideas of what God is supposed to be like, or letting the world or society tell me what good and evil are, I had to let the Bible tell me firsthand. This made me realize that God's nature is so much more stable than we imagine it to be. It is unchanging and completely revealed in His Word. As I read more and more, I began to enjoy knowing God personally and not just knowing about God from other people. I realized that He was God, to be loved, admired, and adored as our Creator, King, and Father. What a great joy it has been of discovering Him more and more each day. Second, the reality of my sinfulness finally hit me in the face. How proud and boastful I was of my supposedly good deeds when the Bible in fact describes all our attempts at obedience as filthy rags. I originally thought that sins were like a list of bad things that I had done, and since my list was shorter than other people's, or so I thought, then I was not as bad as them and probably didn't need that much forgiveness anyway. But the Bible defines sin in Romans 3 as the entire mindset of rejecting God's rule and authority in our lives and not seeking after Him. Ultimately, when I looked deep down inside of me, I knew that I wanted to be the ruler of my own life. I also knew that the intentions I had in doing all those good things was largely self-centered. Only when I saw the depth of my sin could I appreciate the grace and mercy of God. Previously, Jesus dying on the cross was just something I mentally acknowledged. But coming to terms with the fact that I had sinned and that it should have been me on that cross suffering the punishment and consequences of my sin, did I truly thank Jesus for what He did? Such love He must have had that He would have taken this punishment that He didn't deserve. What a great comfort it is to know that even though we were headed for hell and destruction because of our own sin, Christ died to forgive us and welcome us into His family and an eternity with Him. Third, I started to see that the Bible does not actually promise a life of health and happiness as I had misguidedly thought. In fact, verses like 2 Timothy 3:12, which says that everyone who wants to live a godly life will suffer, and Jesus' words about having to deny yourself and take up your cross and follow Him, showed me that being a follower of Christ was actually dangerous business. Rather than signing up for a life of health and happiness, I was signing up for a life of potential suffering because being a Christian means that people will dislike you for being different. Wanting to share the gospel isn't always welcome. Being obedient is often painful and tiring. But through the example of Paul in the Bible, I saw how he counted it a privilege to suffer for the gospel because it had dramatically transformed his life. It challenged me to think, if the gospel has dramatically transformed my life too, such that I was once dead in my sin and now I'm alive in Christ, then shouldn't I be living out my faith every day and telling more people this good news as well? Even if it means suffering for it? How short-sighted I was to simply want to have a good career and a good life. Instead, I now see the importance of living for eternity, which means sharing the gospel and being obedient to God, even when it brings suffering or persecution. I may not have had a dramatic story of falling away from the faith or have some crazy experience that brought me back. But I'd say that once being essentially dead in my sins and now being made alive by the forgiveness of Jesus which He won at the cross is indeed pretty dramatic and exciting. Knowing where I came from, that God created me, and knowing where I'm going, an eternity in heaven with my loving Father, gives me great meaning and purpose in this life. His unending love, incomparable joy, and unfailing word bring me through each day, and I pray that I will continue to stand firm in my 80 or so years on earth to do His work here on earth, living obediently and sharing the gospel. My life for His glory.